So, Crimson Desert came out. Big game, years of delay, lots of hype, and ultimately a $130 million budget with a giant open world. The game sold 2 million copies in its first 24 hours. And then someone walked into a manor house in the southwest part of the first town and looked at a painting on the staircase. Not the whole game, not a cutscene, not a character model or a main menu or anything you'd call load-bearing, just a painting on a staircase. And the art inside is a medieval battle scene in which the horses have 5 legs. At least one warrior appears to have the wrong number of fingers, and somewhere in the lower left corner, a human being is in the process of merging with a rock. This is a $135 million game with a 5-legged horse in a beautiful gold frame. We have a lot to talk about. Okay, so let's actually talk about what went down because the facts matter here. And I think a lot of people skipped them and went straight to the pitchforks, which is fair. The horse does have 5 legs. We all know what that means, but stay with me because this is where it gets interesting. So Crimson Desert launched March 13th, 2026. And within hours, players were on Reddit and Bluesky posting screenshots of in-game paintings that looked distinctly, specifically AI generated. Wrong finger counts, faces that are more of a suggestion than an actual face, and the horse situation. So players started cataloging all of these, the battle painting in Oakenshield Manor being the most widely shared, but there were others, a woodcut style piece, some additional decorative elements scattered throughout the world, and the community reaction was immediate. Some players even refunded the game outright. Some said it didn't bother them, and the subreddit started getting flooded with posts flagging more and more examples, and then getting hit by automated takedowns because of just the sheer volume, which is its own kind of chaos. Now, Fingerless, the developer, initially said nothing, which, as someone who kind of watches how companies handle this stuff, can either be a good or bad sign, but they did eventually release a statement, and I'm going to read it to you because I think the actual words matter here. They said, during development, some 2D visual props were created as part of early-stage iteration using experimental AI generative tools. Those assets helped them rapidly explore tone and atmosphere in early production. The intention was always for them to be replaced before release. Some were unintentionally included in the final build. Fingerless called this not in line with their internal standards and did take full responsibility, acknowledged that they should have disclosed the AI use, apologized for the lack of transparency, and said a comprehensive audit is now underway with replacement assets coming in upcoming patches. So, prototype art, supposed to be replaced, a couple of slips through QA, they caught it, acknowledged it, apologized, and are fixing it. So essentially that is the story in full as of time of this recording. Now, is that the end of the conversation? No, because this is not the first time this has happened, and it will not be the last, quite frankly, and understanding why, I think, requires us to zoom out a little bit. For example, last year, Claire Obscur Expedition 33 went through almost the exact same situation. Players found what appeared to be AI-generated environmental art in a critically acclaimed, genuinely beloved game. Real community uproar. They even lost out on Game of the Year at one of these awards, and sound familiar? Baldur's Gate 3, also critically acclaimed, also widely beloved, came up in a similar conversation around AI use during early production. And Fingerless isn't even new to this specifically. Players dug up examples of AI use from a previous Black Desert expansion. So 3 different studios with multiple games across multiple years, same basic pattern every time. AI tools used somewhere in development, something surfaces in the final product, community finds it, outrage cycle, company responds. So we're not talking about one studio making a bad call in isolation, we're talking about a recurring industry-wide pattern, and that changes the question we should be asking. I think the question stops being, why did Fingerless do this? And starts being, why does this keep happening across the whole industry? And what does it tell us about where we actually are right now? My answer is this. And some of you guys are not gonna like it, but it keeps happening because we are in a period where AI tools are genuinely valuable and embedded in game development pipelines, and nobody, not developers, not platforms, not even consumers, have agreed on what responsible use looks like or what disclosure actually means or where that line even is. And that's not a defense of anyone, that's just the situation, and I think we need to absorb this for a minute before we decide what to do about it because it's going to shape everything else. So Steam does have a policy, and since 2024, developers have been required to disclose if generative AI was used in making their game. Crimson Desert made no such disclosure, and Pearl Abyss admitted that was wrong. That part is not complicated, that part is clear, but here's where it gets genuinely messy, and this is the part of the conversation that I don't think gets enough airtime. When does that tag actually go on a game? If a developer uses an AI transcription tool to take notes during a production stand-up, do they have to disclose that? If a programmer uses an AI code assistant that suggests a function or does some autocomplete or helps with unit testing development and they accept all of that, does that count? If a writer runs their quest dialog through Grammarly for, I don't know, basic spell check and grammar assistance, is that generative AI use that requires a Steam label? Like, what about a concept artist who uses AI to rapidly generate 20 mood reference images that never appear in the game at all, but shape the direction of the art that did? Now, I'm not being sarcastic here, I genuinely don't know, and based on the evidence, I don't think Valve does either, because the policy puts the burden of disclosure entirely on the developers and provides almost no guidance on what actually should trigger that tag. There's actually a survey done on this. A majority of developers said they believe there should be AI disclosure requirements, but most also said Valve's current approach is flawed and they weren't aligned on what good disclosure actually looks like in practice. So we have a rule. The rule says basically disclose AI, and nobody agrees on what counts. And developers are left to make their own judgment calls, and that's why we keep getting inconsistency. Some studios disclose everything, some nothing, most somewhere in between based on just vibes and legal caution. For example, in this scenario, I think it's pretty clear what generative AI is referring to when it comes to artwork. Majority of the industry and customer base more or less feels the same as far as generated artwork. But then we have that gray area. And here's the part I really want you to think about, because I hear people say just disclose everything. Any AI use, any context, just slap that label on it. And that sounds reasonable at first, but let's think about what that actually produces. AI tools are embedded in game development right now, not for everything, not everywhere, but they are being used across pipelines for things like QA testing, bug detection, audio cleanup, localization, code review, and concept iteration, things that happen deep in the process and will never really appear in the final product. That tools that developers use the same way they use any other piece of software to do their jobs faster and better. If the standard becomes use AI in any capacity at any point, that label is going on basically everything. Like, let's be real here. In every major studio release, many indie projects that ran a build through an AI test suite, every game where a developer used an AI assistant to write a function or autocomplete a for loop for you, and that moment that tag is on everything, it means nothing. It becomes wallpaper or just noise, and players tune it out. It stops being informative and just starts being noise. And the entire reason for having disclosure, giving consumers real information to make real decisions, completely falls apart under its own weight. So if disclose nothing is clearly wrong and disclose everything renders the signal meaningless, what we actually need is something more specific, something that draws a meaningful distinction between AI as a background tool in the development process and AI as something that directly impacted what ended up in the product you paid for, like AI-generated skins, maybe. Looking at you, Call of Duty. And right now, that definition doesn't exist. Nobody's built it. There's not an industry standard. They haven't agreed on it yet, and the platforms haven't defined it. So I think that's why we keep arriving at the same place, the community that's rightfully frustrated, but not totally sure what they're asking for, and a developer that probably knew they should have said something, but didn't know what the standard was, and a disclosure label that's either missing or eventually going to mean nothing at all. That's the problem. That's the actual problem, not the horse. So here's kind of where I end up when I follow all of this to a logical conclusion. The platforms haven't defined it, developers haven't defined it, regulators certainly haven't, and disclose everything collapses into noise. Nobody's handing down a standard from on high that solves this cleanly, so who actually draws the line? I think the honest answer is consumers, the people buying the games. And I don't mean that in a dismissive, just vote with your wallet and good luck kind of way. I mean it structurally. Markets are actually pretty good at defining preferences when two conditions are met. People have accurate information and they act consistently on what they say that they care about. So right now, neither of those are being met. Think about what a functional version of this could look like. If a meaningful portion of players clearly and consistently through actual purchase decisions I mean, if a meaningful portion of players said clearly, consistently through actual purchase decisions that I will not buy a game where AI generated final visible assets that replaced humans' artists' work, and then they mean it, they follow through with it, they act on it, they don't purchase, the studios would change pretty fast. And because the math of $60 times 2 million copies is very persuasive, there will need to be changes made in the development process. But if players said, I don't care if AI was used for prototyping and concepting, as long as the shipped product is the work of human artists, then studios know exactly where the line is and they can build workflows around it with a clear signal that is actionable. The problem is that none of those signals are getting sent clearly right now because we're not making informed decisions. We're making reactive ones based on discovering things after the fact, based on incomplete information, based on an outrage cycle that doesn't distinguish between a slipped placeholder painting and a studio that used AI to systematically eliminate an entire art team. And those are not the same thing, at least not to me. I don't think they're even close to the same thing. And a game where AI was used in prototyping and one painting accidentally shipped is not the same as a game where AI deployed to cut 20 jobs and fill the product with generated content at scale. Those deserve completely different responses, but the conversation right now treats them almost identically. And that actually makes things worse for artists because when everything gets the same level of outrage, nothing gets the level of outrage it actually deserves. And here's the uncomfortable part. If AI used becomes a label on every game and consumers keep buying them at the same rate, the market has spoken. It said it doesn't care. Reddit threads don't change purchase data, but if consumers can get specific, if they articulate what kind of AI use they actually object to and act on it consistently before purchase rather than reacting after discovery, and there's enough people that care in this way, that becomes a signal that studios can see and respond to. Disclosure standards form not from top-down policy, but from demonstrated preference, and the industry needs to figure out where the line is, or consumers are going to show them. So does a line exist and we just haven't drawn it yet? I don't know, but it's our job to figure that out, not Valve's, not Pearl Abyss, but ours, which means the outrage has to evolve into something more specific to actually work. And that's the landscape. But here's where I personally land. I do love games and I love the craft that goes into making them. The artists, writers, designers, developers who build these worlds deserve credit, fair compensation, and real protection. I'm not really neutral on that, but I also think AI is real. It is here and it's not going away because a portion of the internet is angry about it. That's just true. And pretending otherwise doesn't protect artists. It doesn't help shape anything moving forward. It just means the decisions about how AI gets used are happening while we're not paying attention. So when I look at the actual facts of Crimson Desert, prototype art, not meant to ship, slipped through QA, company acknowledged and is patching it, that is not the hill I'm choosing to die on. It doesn't, for me, honestly bug me all that much. The horse is funny, the gold frame is a choice, the QA team owes someone a very large coffee, and what bothers me is the part underneath all of it. Not that this happened, stuff slips through QA, that's real life in game development, but that there's no framework for any of us to know about it beforehand. No disclosure, no agreed standard, no way for a consumer to make an informed decision. And Pearl Abyss, to their credit, did the right thing when it came out. They didn't gaslight anyone. They didn't claim the horses are canonically six-limbed and that's just the lore. They said this happened, it was wrong, they're fixing it, and they should have been transparent. That's what accountability looks like, and I think we should be able to acknowledge that without it being a controversial statement. But the bigger issue was never really about Pearl Abyss. It's about the fact that we are collectively right now in the middle of figuring out what responsible AI use in creative work actually means. And I don't think as a whole, we as society had figured that out yet. And the gap between no framework and functional framework is exactly where controversies like this are going to keep living until we can define what that looks like. And the version I want, my actual take, not a neutral observation, is specific, meaningful, consumer-facing disclosure, at least for the time being, while we're trying to figure out this transitionary period into the AI era. Not a checkbox that goes on everything and means nothing. Enough real context that you can decide before you buy, was AI present in the final shipped product? In what capacity? Did it support human creative work or replace it? And that's the information that lets consumers draw that line. And I think it gets there eventually, but not because the industry will do it voluntarily, but because consumers will get specific enough about what they want that the market has to respond. We're not there yet, but we're having the conversation loudly and sometimes incoherently, occasionally about a horse's leg count, but we are having it, and that's actually how this stuff moves. Now, the uncomfortable truth is this is going to go with the majority. So if you're somebody that doesn't want AI touching any part of the development, you're most likely in the minority. And you're probably not going to move the needle that much. I hate to say that. There is a middle ground. AI isn't going away. It's a very powerful, revolutionary tool. I do believe that AI is the future, but I think these conversations are important in deciding how we want to shape that use as society, and we need to talk about this stuff more. At the end of the day, the horse can have as many legs as it wants. Tell me before I buy the game. Now, I'm genuinely curious, where do you guys land on this? Like, drop it in the comments. I don't have a clean answer right now. I'm not pretending to. We are just in such a weird flux area. And I do think, like I said, this conversation matters more than I think the answer does. But go ahead and like this video if you liked it. If you don't like it, let me know in the comments how you think I can improve and what you didn't like about it. And if you liked this video, you might as well subscribe, because I talk about technology, AI. I'm going to start doing some educational topics for noobs and normies if you want to learn more. And I do a little bit of gaming, so I'd love to have you as a part of this community. But I will be honest, if you don't subscribe, I'm probably just going to have to banish you to the Shadow Realm.
Much better.
Anyway, that's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and peace out. Bye.